Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr, and also to my left, Kevin Noon, for a very special live Friday edition of the Buckeye Weekly podcast. Stop looking up and down, fellas. Tom, how's it going?
Despite Tony's lack of ability to tell direction, I'm the one on his left. And I'm Tom.
For
I'm
the
not
viewers,
Kevin.
for the
I'm
viewers,
good. The viewers see Kevin on the right and me on the left.
my-
It's okay.
my perspective.
We should have.
There, so we
we
can
should
see
have-
the shot we're talking about.
Yeah,
There you
we
go.
should have. We should have. It's okay. It's okay. We should have worked on left and right. Hold up your
That's my
hand.
left.
The one that
That's
makes an
my
L.
left.
Yeah.
Let's just start over
Yeah. No.
without
yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
Let me build a quick
that's
two shot.
tough but fair.
Kevin, how's it going?
Tough but fair. Luke says very early for a Friday Live. So Luke, well, it's lunchtime. So
Yeah.
theoretically, you shouldn't be able to watch this at work in the afternoon because you should be working. So we're trying to help you out and do it.
But what happens if
You're
Luke,
welcome.
I mean, it could be breakfast if Luke's out on the West Coast. You just don't know. I mean, our reach is far and wide. I mean, worldwide.
You're a Dodgers fan. You know West Coast people always show up late. We just started the show. He can't be on the West Coast.
And we leave early.
Mhm.
So I figure if we go an hour, I only need to be here for the 4th through 6th innings.
Tom, you're a Mets fan. You know fans don't show up in October.
Oh well.
Well, the gates aren't open in October.
Oh, you think you can hurt me by saying bad things about the Mets, friends? There's nothing you can say about the Mets that I haven't already said. So
Very true. So here we are. It is Penn State week. We are one day. Oh, geez, Tom, great hat there. We are one day away from the Penn State football game. A night game should be an outstanding atmosphere. Ryan Day has asked fans to show up and be loud and make an impact on the game and give Ohio State any advantage they can because, Tom, Ohio State doesn't have enough advantages in this game.
yeah, I mean they do have the slight advantage of getting to play the Penn State offense, which seems like it's generally worked out fairly well for people this year. And PJ Mustipher's out for the Penn State defense, which means they're probably gonna be able to run the ball more. So yeah, and you have it home, and you have it at night, and you have a loud crowd. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot that's pointing in Ohio State's favor, but yeah, I am looking forward to what that atmosphere looks like on Saturday night because we have not had a full stadium, like actual live opponent, not corpse like Akron, for since 2019 sometime. Was there a primetime game in 2019? Because 2020 the stadium was empty all year. The Oregon game was at noon, and the Akron game was against Akron. So this is like the first real, true, like exciting primetime game against a good opponent in Ohio Stadium. I'm really looking forward to it. When was the last time we had a home game, an Ohio State home game that we got to go to that was primetime, good opponent? I'm thinking back to 2019. It feels like a lot of those games were at noon. 2018. When was the last good primetime home game?
Well, we can all look for that and see who comes up with it first. Kevin, another advantage for Ohio State in this one, they don't have to travel to the game via horse and buggy on the Pennsylvania Turnpike like Penn State.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, they can sit there and get in their crop duster planes that can take off from State College and then, maybe fly to Altoona and then get into a little larger plane and then maybe fly to Pittsburgh and then, take modern air travel here to John Glenn International Port Columbus Airport. I still have a hard time not calling it Port Columbus. But, it's night road games, regardless of if you're in an Amish buggy, a skateboard, a hoverboard, whatever method of transportation you've got. Night road games are a challenge. And, it'll be nice for Ohio State knowing that they will be able to stay at the Blackwell the night before. They'll go through their normal routine, somewhat amended for the night game, and won't have that road fatigue.
Looks like 2019 Michigan State was the last home night game against a halfway decent opponent.
Halfway decent. I mean, was Michigan State halfway decent that year?
They were 4-1. We didn't know they were about to go 7-6 and lose the literal worst Red Box Bowl in the history of the Red Box Bowl. 7-6. They finished 7-6 with a 7-6 loss in the Red Box Bowl. Like that was like that was a late stage Mark D'Antonio Michigan State season for sure.
Good news about the Red Box Bowl, you just return it the next day, and you're done with it. You don't have to relive it. You don't have to keep it with you. You don't even have to keep it on the record book. So
Mine had a big scratch down the middle of it. Didn't want to play.
That's true. And now you might get charged for that. I see a question from Jim Kroeniger. How do you think Sean Clifford does tomorrow? And I think that's going to be a big factor in this game in terms of, does Penn State score 17 or do they score 7? That kind of thing. I don't know how much of a factor he will be in terms of keeping up with Ohio State's offense. But this is also the best offense that Ohio State, or the best defense Ohio State has played this far. Penn State has the number 3 pass efficiency defense in the nation behind Wisconsin and Georgia. However, the best passing offense they've played this year is Auburn by far in terms of passing yards. And if Auburn is the best passing offense you've played, you haven't played anybody. They've played, I think, the number 99 and number 100, the 123 and the 124 passing offenses this season. So,
somebody's been tail of the tape.
Oh, no. Is that, I'm sure that's been in there, but I don't read anything. I don't even read the newspaper. I don't read the internet. I don't read Twitter. But as Kevin said, you could check out his tail of the tape and you'll get numbers like that. And I do think Penn State has talent on defense because we've seen it. But I can't wait to see how much of that number 3 pass efficiency defense is just bloated because they have played nobody, Tom.
Yeah, they have not played anybody, and that's kind of life in the Big Ten this year. I think you look at both teams. You look at you could have that same conversation about Michigan State. Like, how are their defenses so good? Is everyone in the Big Ten just incredible at defense? It's like, well, there might be a whole lot of quarterbacks who can't really throw all that well this year, and a sort of lack of skill talent all around the conference. So, yeah, I don't think the Big Ten defenses just across the conference are as good as their statistical profiles might say right now.
Certainly not. And Kevin, what is, I guess we haven't, you've done your score prediction. Tom has done his score prediction. I've done my score prediction. What did you come up with your score, and tell us a little bit about how you came to that number? Do you have it offhand, perhaps?
Well, I have to kind of think about that one, as I was going to try and punch up my one shot, but I think I'm around the range of, I think I said 45-10, and I know I picked blowouts almost every week. Maybe not Oregon week, but still ended up picking the wrong team in that one. But I just think that Penn State's going to have a hard time getting to 20. I mean, Penn State has not really been able to break 20 this year. That's kind of been about their high water mark. And I think that this Ohio State offense is going to be unlike anything else that Penn State has seen, because not only is C.J. Stroud and the Ohio State passing game dangerous, Ohio State also has a tremendous running game. And I think that we don't speak enough about the balanced offense and the fact that Ohio State has the ability to run, has the ability to pass, has it all going there. It's going to make it very difficult for Penn State to be able to pick one or the other. So if Penn State says we're going to sell out and try to stop the run, we're not going to let TreVeyon Henderson beat us, I think Ohio State's really going to dominate this vaunted pass defense. And then if it's the other way around and they're like, well, we're going to sit there and make sure that Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba and these guys are not the ones that are going to be the ones beating us, I think we're going to see a field day for TreVeyon Henderson in the running game.
Yeah, and with TreVeyon Henderson and hitting that Penn State, which is a softer middle than it has been, Illinois rushed for 356, 357 yards on them. To me, you start creeping those safeties in, that's good. That's going to be bad news for the deep shots for Penn State, and whether that's Jackson Smith and Jigba down the seam again. I saw a stat from somebody that he's leading the nation in 15-yard receptions down the middle of the field or something of that nature, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon, certainly not in this game. Super chat from Yakov. The Illinois unwanted offensive line pushed around that Penn State defensive line, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, they averaged a little north of, I think, 6 yards a carry, 5-6 yards a carry, something like that, which is not incredible, but I mean, that is not a good Penn State, a good Illinois offensive line. They've not been able to run the ball real consistently against other teams, and it wasn't like they had a bunch of short plays and then busted 180-yarder. It was just a lot of just like grinding out, getting a decent push, you don't have a back who's a TreVeyon Henderson back who's going to turn a 1 yard hole into a 15-yard run. So it was just a lot of good, consistent push. Again, losing PJ Mustipher in the middle of that defensive line really, really hurts Penn State. That's a real area of vulnerability. And you've got a much better offensive line from Ohio State coming in, and you have a much better running back or team of, tandem of running backs coming in this weekend than Penn State faced last weekend. I think that's a real area of vulnerability. I mean, that was when Tony and I did our bold predictions. I think we were both kind of heavy on TreVeyon Henderson having a pretty big day. I think that's why I think that's a real area where Penn State is going to be vulnerable. They're going to have to overcompensate, like Tony said, maybe bring some safeties down, and then that opens up. It's going to be potentially one of those real old school run to set up the pass kind of games for Ohio State.
And then you have, as the running backs get into that second level and beyond, you have very good blocking receivers, Jeremy Ruckert blocking downfield, and these defensive backs are going to be so preoccupied with their receivers that they're going to be, it's just going to be difficult for them to help out in the run game as much as they would like, because everybody is so concerned about the Ohio State deep passing attack, and it just lends itself to just voids in the defense. Kevin, another one from Yakov here. I'm happy you guys cover OSU. That said, how fun would it be instead to cover Lane Kiffin?
Oh, dear Lord. I found my one shot. It would be fun. I always enjoy a good press conference. I always enjoy having plenty of diverse things to write about, and I think Lane Kiffin would provide that in excess. I do like to write a little bit about defense, though, and I don't know if his teams necessarily have shown us that at this point, but it would be a lot of fun. I mean, I'd want to cover Lane Kiffin 10 years ago, even younger, more brash, more whatever. I'm going to not throw certain terms out there, but I think that 10 years ago, Lane Kiffin would be even more fun because he just really had zero you-know-whats to give and just kind of threw it all out there on the table. Is he growing up right now? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, a little better than he was before in terms of that, but grab your popcorn, whatever you want to sit there and say. I mean, he would be a lot of fun to cover. I don't know if we would have as many fantastic, fabulous bowl trips like we have under this boring run of Ohio State coaches that we've seen here. But in terms of just the day-to-day, yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun.
I don't know, Kevin. I think Shreveport is a lot like New Orleans, probably. One of the things that I do like about Lane Kiffin, and I've talked in the past about the younger coaches who have grown up playing video games, I think it would be fun to have cover a head coach who is meme efficient, and proficient, and that would be something where just the nod to the fans and things like that Lane Kiffin does, I think is fun, because Ryan Day is a more serious person, but also, as Kevin said, the seriousness brings about better bowl trips. But Tom, would you enjoy covering Lane Kiffin?
I am floored that no one went down and did the first year of Lane Kiffin versus first year of Mike Leach book. Like, that seemed like as soon as those two coaches got hired, I was like, I think I've been in the state of Mississippi for about 3 days in my life, and I thought about quitting my job and going down and writing that book. Like, you have Lane Kiffin, who is one of the biggest wild cards in the sport in terms of, on and off the field. You have Mike Leach, who is a rather unique personality running a rather unique offense in a league where it really hadn't been run before. And you have college football's dumbest rivalry where, two coaches can get fired after the same game where the game swings on a player pretending to be a dog peeing on the field. Like, I'm sorry, you cannot beat the Egg Bowl in terms of just brilliant, wonderful stupidity. We have a question from our Ask the Insiders board, which we always like to prioritize those. So let's run through those real quick. From XX Deuces Wild 87. This is a 3-parter. First one: who are your top 3 players who need to have a good game for Ohio State to win?
I would
Tony.
say yes. I'll say C.J. Stroud. He needs to perform against the Penn State secondary. Denzel Burke against Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington, those two guys. And then how about in terms of some pass rushing? Let's go Zach Harrison again. Let's continue to see him coming on. So CJ Stroud hitting those tight windows, not gambling too much, reverting to maybe some dump off passes in tight coverage situations. And then, as I said, Zach Harrison rushing the passer, creating an issue, forcing Sean Clifford to maybe move a little bit quicker. And I've already forgotten the third guy that I mentioned, who was also the second guy I mentioned. But I gave you all three.
Denzel Burke.
There you go. Some freshman corner against John Dotson, who took Sean Wade to school a bit last year. Let's see what he does this year. And they're not just going to be matched up head to head the entire time. It's a side of the field type of thing. And so I am interested to see how that goes. And if he has a great game, then I think that's three areas where Ohio State, if they lock that up, Penn State really has no chance.
Yeah, and I would agree with at least the first two for sure. I think you could pick a different defensive lineman. You could go Haskell Garrett there just as easily, or Tyreek Smith now that he's back. Take your choice of defensive lineman. But I think you're pretty much right on the nose there, Kevin. Which recruiting visitor are you most interested in seeing how the weekend visit goes? So not necessarily who's the biggest or whatever. Which one are you most interested in seeing how the weekend visit goes?
Oh boy, there's a lot of them there. I mean, I could sit there and I could focus in on a 22 because we think that he might be on commit watch. I could focus on a 23 just because of the enormity of the situation. I'm pulling up the list. I mean, Hero Canoe is somebody that comes to mind. I think he really likes Ohio State. We've talked about it at length. I've heard Bill, I've heard Mark, I've heard Alex all mention it. I've said the same thing too. He doesn't have a team that he grew up rooting for. He's from Germany. He really has a great relationship with Larry Johnson. His mom is coming into town for the visit with him. I think that one is very important. Whenever Sonny Styles is on campus, I think that one's important. I need to make sure that he's going to be here. I don't have the list in front of me at the moment, but he's somebody there. How about Troy Bowles, the 23 linebacker, Todd Bowles' kid? I've heard a lot of positive buzz about him. He's somebody that I'm very interested to see if this is the visit that could put Ohio State over the top, because Ohio State, one way or the other, however you look at it, is not deep at linebacker. And I know that there are two linebackers in the class right now with C.J. Hicks and Gabe Powers. And a lot of people think Gabe Powers could slide down to end. So if that does happen, and that's not necessarily what anybody's saying or wants to believe at this point, but if that does happen, I mean, Ohio State really isn't that much deeper at linebacker. So I would really, they need to keep that moving. And I think that when you sit there and you're a 23 guy and you're going to see guys who are going to slide off the board there, 23 has got to be the year of linebacker recruiting for me.
Well, I know Jimmy Rolder, the 2022 linebacker, is going to be on campus as well. We'll see how serious they get there. I think for me, maybe it's Xavier Nwankpa, who seems to be trending away as Iowa's defense, and he is from Iowa, and Iowa's defense continues to look really, really good, and maybe the heartstrings will pull at him. But I mean, there's just, I'm looking at this list, and I don't know, there's 40 players listed, and that's just basketball, or that's just football. That's not basketball. That's not wrestling. There's 10 wrestlers coming, I think. So it's a huge weekend, and I don't know, it's hard to pick one guy that is the most important or the most interesting to watch.
And the last of his three-parter was, who can do the most push-ups between Tom, Tony, and Kevin? Now, I think I probably almost win this one by default. I mean, I'm the youngest of the three of us. So
also, I don't really like orange sherbet.
How do I make Tony?
I was
going to say I'm team sit-ups. I'll whip you guys at sit-ups, but I'm push-ups not my strength.
I think we properly no-sold that one. That was good. All right, so that was XX Deuces Wild 87XX. And if you guys are members of BuckeyeScoop.com, throw those questions on our Ask the Insiders board in the thread that's posted called Friday Lunchtime Live Show. We are going to be prioritizing those as we go through all of the other questions, because we tend to get 1 million on YouTube.
And there's a question here from Adam Baker on YouTube. Did other teams really recruit TreVeyon Henderson as a defensive back? I talked to his head coach, I don't know, a year or two ago, and after his sophomore year, yes, the teams were recruiting him as a defensive back. I think it was after his sophomore year when Brent Venables told him that he was the best sophomore defensive back they had seen on film that year. And Clemson offered him as a defensive back. Other schools, I think Florida and another offered him as a wide receiver, as a slot receiver. He didn't really become a true running back until his junior year, and that was only 1 year because he didn't play as a senior. So there was some as late in his sophomore year where they started to realize, you know what, we should give him the ball more, and he did very well with that. And so, yes, he was definitely recruited as a defensive back. I go back to Ezekiel Elliott, talking to one of his family members, and they said if Notre Dame had recruited Ezekiel Elliott as a running back instead of a safety, he's probably going to the Irish with Tony Alford, who I think was Tony Alford the Notre Dame running backs coach at that point.
I think so, because I mean, he was there immediately before, and he didn't come over until
2015.
Mike Weber's freshman year was 2015. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it would have been Tony Alford there.
14. 15.
Pretty sure.
Yes,
yeah. 15. Yeah. So that because Tony Alford came over after Stan Drayton left right after Mike Weber signed, which was I think 15. So yeah, that would have been. Someone said, "Not cool, Tony. We're going to need you to be a lot more specific." But go ahead, Tony.
About what? What'd I do? Oh yes, exactly. Not cool.
I don't know.
No, that was also I see that.
Johnny Bullitt says, "Not cool, Tony." I mean, there's a lot of possible answers there.
Well, that was also my nickname in high school.
Well, I was going to say that should probably be read Tony's not cool.
However you want it, I could put it on the back of a shirt and go
only
there. But
only if it's airbrushed. It's got to be one of those like Myrtle Beach airbrush shirts with like SpongeBob on it.
I can do that. Also, with Ezekiel Elliott, I remember watching the Army All-American Bowl, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to put you at safety. We're going to put you at defensive back. You're not good enough to really play running back here at the Army All-American Bowl." And so maybe that's why Army backed out of sponsorship, just because of how wrong they were about Ezekiel Elliott. Probably not, though. So I'm just looking to see if there's any questions here. I have a question for you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Over under TreVeyon Henderson, 142.5 yards rushing.
I think I picked him to have 130, something like that on the. That
was a bold prediction, though.
Yeah, on the bold prediction, 130. I mean, if I'm picking him to have 130 and the range is just 130 and up, I guess I probably have to go over on 142. So I'll go over on that. I don't know that he's hitting a ton of huge ones because I think the back end of the Penn State defense is better. But maybe he hits one because he's going to get to that second level enough that he's going to break one or two. And the question is, does he break them when they're 30 yards from a touchdown or 70 yards from a touchdown? And that's going to probably impact that bottom line. But it does feel like this is a game where he's probably getting 20 carries. I don't know if he's getting more than 20 carries because they might be comfortably ahead to the point where they don't need to give him 25 to 30 carries. So I'll say over on 142.5.
Kevin, over under 9.5 carries for Mayan Williams. Where are you?
Over. And that's just because I think that Ohio State's going to need to run to set up the pass, as you guys had mentioned before. And because of that, I think that if we see 20 carries for TreVeyon Henderson, where are the rest of the carries going to come from? And we've not seen a lot of Q runs, so I think we're going to see Mayan Williams. I think we're going to see some. I'm not saying that we're going to see Chop, and happy birthday, Chop, by the way. I did see on social that it's his birthday. I don't think we're going to see Chop on the second series necessarily. I think we see a couple series of Henderson, but I think we will see times if there's prolonged drives and Ohio State's just ripping off 7, 8, 9 yards a pop, that we could see some substitution there, or we could see maybe a dedicated Chop series or two. And then again, based on my score, if 45-10 happens, I mean, we're going to see, I think we're going to see some guys come in and see some prolonged runs. So that, I think that kind of fits there too.
Well, and let's go ahead and give our scores, Tom. We did that on yesterday's show. I went 41-7, only 7 with the faulty logic, and I admit that it's faulty, but that's not my fault. That's James Franklin's fault. The faulty logic that James Franklin won't bother kicking field goals because field goals are meaningless. That's what he should do. He should only try to get touchdowns, and I think Ohio State's defense will hold up in the red zone and stop them on downs. Now, what will he do? Say it's 34-7, in the third quarter and they're got like a 4th and 4 from the 17, is he going to go for it or is he going to try to kick a field goal? Obviously, he should go for it. Does that mean he's going to go for it? Absolutely not. It's James Franklin. But I think he is. I'm just giving him too much credit, or maybe I'm just assuming, or maybe I can get lucky and some of these kickers, the Penn State kicker will miss some of their kicks. So Tom, I went 41-7. Kevin went 38 to 28.
45-10.
45-10. Tom.
I went 38-13 because I agree with everything you said, that this is a game where you should not be kicking field goals. Put it this way, I don't think Penn State's going to miss an extra point. So I, too, am familiar with the body of work of one James Franklin. And, I think I know exactly what to expect. And it's not going to go well. And there's going to be a bunch of things that are like, that wasn't at all what you should have done there. And, that's just – we all have our things. Like we all have our little, are things that we're really good at, and that is one of the things he's really good at, is doing not the right thing. So good
like
job.
Push-ups.
Is he the best at not being quite good enough, or just like the worst game manager? I don't know that he's the worst, but you can always count on him for not being as good as he should be. Like he needs, like Juwan Howard has a veteran former head coach with him. I forget his name. But like James Franklin almost needs somebody like that. Yeah, exactly. It's somebody that's like, hey, here's how much time is on the clock. Here's what you should do. Ryan Day has Kevin Wilson and somebody else that they're always talking about clock management and things like that. James Franklin, coaches have their 2-point charts and everything. He needs like 14 charts and he needs to follow them religiously, because when he's just thinking on the fly, it doesn't go well.
Well, I did a morning scoop show earlier in the year with Rob Ash from Championship Analytics, which is a company that does, they'll produce like a binder for you every week that says, okay, this is custom done based on your team, the team you're playing, the optimized statistical thing to do in each of these game states. So if it's the third quarter and you're down by 10 points and you've got the ball 4th and 2 on the opponent's 23-yard line, here's what we would recommend you do. He needs one of those services real badly. And if he subscribes to one, he needs to follow them more closely, because there's a whole bunch of times he's doing stuff that's like, oh no, that's not at all. That's like the third choice that you would have there. Someone last week did that too. Who was it? Someone kicked a 57-yard field goal last week. It was when we were sitting at lunch watching.
We were sitting at lunch. It was Kansas, wasn't it?
Was it Kansas? Yeah, it was Kansas. Kansas was up in the third quarter, and they line up for a 57-yard field goal, and it's like, you'd be better off punting here and trying to play field position based on how Oklahoma's struggling to move the ball. You'd be better off going for it here and it was, I had someone in my mentions explaining that, well, actually, they're trying to get points. It's like, oh, really? No kidding. Great job. But if you want to get points and you want to go for it, like, what's the likelihood you're making a 57-yard field goal? Probably not. I mean, you want to say 1 in 3, be real charitable. Okay, 1 in 3. What's the likelihood you pick up a 4th and 10? Probably at least 1 in 3. It's at least equal. And then you have the opportunity to A, kick a closer field goal, or B, score a touchdown, which would be, guess what? More points. Guess what? If you want to score points, you want to score more points whenever possible. So yeah, that was one of those, like, yes, that is technically one of the 3 choices, but no, that is not actually the correct choice there. James Franklin is someone who you just constantly go, like, you really need someone, you need like the good angel sitting on your shoulder telling you, here's what you should do. And you should not listen to the guy in the little Elmer Fudd in the devil suit saying, no, punt it here, kick it, kick a field goal, kick a 20-yard field goal. Do it. You want to.
I am evil Homer.
Matt Roberts asks if we're expecting OSU to prepare for Penn State's backup quarterback. What kind of offense do they need to prepare or adjust for? A more running quarterback, more pro style, more RPO, etc. Penn State's backup quarterback, Taquan Roberson, not exactly an accurate or adequate thrower at this point. I think Tom and I have talked about it this week. If Sean Clifford goes down, then you're going to see pretty much what you saw last week from Indiana's offense, which is it all bogs down. When Clifford went down against Iowa, would they have like 52 plays without Clifford and 56 yards of total offense, something like that, to give you an idea that there's very little passing that will be involved. And yeah, Roberson can run the ball, but if you just play contain on him and force him to throw, now you're that's playing into Ohio State's hands. And then if you pressure him, now you're going to be forcing some turnovers. So I don't know that you really need to adjust, maybe look for the run a little bit more, but also if you stay aggressive, you're going to force some mistakes. So I don't think there's any big change. And could you see something like when Clifford went down and Will Levis came in and that was an effective drive?
Yeah, but I mean, I think Will Levis was a more effective thrower than Taquan Roberson is. I mean, Taquan Roberson, you've seen kind of nothing. And, this is early enough in his career that it's possible that since the Iowa game, he's improved quite a bit. You will sometimes see a dramatic improvement in the span of a couple weeks for someone this early in their career. But I don't really, I mean, this feels like if Sean Clifford goes down, it is like 404 error, offense not found. Like because here's the problem with trying to rely on him running the ball. Their offensive line is hot garbage and has been hot garbage for several years now. So if you're not getting holes and you're not getting push, like maybe you can, you sneak out the side and pick up a first down here and there, but you're not going to be able to consistently move the ball. And, you got to remember they were up 17-3 when Clifford got hurt at Iowa, and Iowa's offense is not exactly, not exactly the greatest show on turf. And they just, Penn State was just like completely out of the game after that. Like no Clifford, just like no offense at all. And the line hasn't gotten materially better. Noah Cain is not running the ball any better than he was a couple weeks ago. Yeah, you can kind of heave up. You can do the, the deep state thing like they did a couple years ago, which is kind of like heave one deep and pray. And, maybe you hit one or two of those to Jahan Dotson, but it's like your offense at that point is heave one deep and pray, or hope that you can, sneak out and, trick the defense and pick up a first down every once in a while. But yeah, I mean, if he's out, if Clifford's out, like it didn't look good last week. And it feels like they were playing a compromised quarterback last week because they knew that whatever was behind him was not nearly as good, even as compromised Sean Clifford.
Kevin, Tom and I talk about Michigan on our Michigan Monday podcast and how they haven't been tested in the secondary. They haven't really been attacked. I'm wondering if we can say the same thing about Ohio State, and if this wouldn't be a good opportunity for whether it's Clifford or Taquan Roberson to attack Ohio State deep, test those safeties, get Bryson Shaw in coverage issues, see if Lathan Ransom can hold up, because they've been pretty quiet because there's been no business near them. It's like everything gets shut down at 5:00 at night and there's nothing going on. And maybe they need to open up those hours and let's see what Seven Banks can do. How many pass interferences? Is Cameron Brown ready to go? Is Denzel Burke as good as he was early? We saw him have some issues against Maryland. Maybe they should test a secondary, try to get as much time for protection as possible, of course, and then go downfield and see what happens.
I mean, that's all well and good in theory if you connect them, but if you sit there and you do that a couple of times and you take 21 seconds off the clock and you're giving the ball right back to Ohio State, that seems to fly in the face of logic there. I think that if you feel that your guys can sit there and at least put it within the catch radius of the receivers, that's all well and good. But based on everything I've heard about Penn State's backups, I mean, and I'm not even necessarily talking about a diminished Clifford. I mean, I'm not convinced that we're going to see anything within the range. So you can't commit pass interference on an uncatchable ball, and I think we might see a lot of uncatchable balls. So, I think if you can execute, why not? Why not? You're not running. You're not doing a good job there with Noah Cain and Keyvon Lee. So, and if it's Clifford, he really shouldn't be running. Whether or not he does, kid's a gamer. I mean, I expect him to empty the bucket going against home state team, but that could have major diminishing returns on it, because then they get into a situation of one of their two backups, and with the one, I heard that he didn't practice every day this week. Whether or not, I don't know what's behind that. So why not? I mean, you're going to have to do something. You're not going to hold Ohio State to 0. So you've got to find a way to put points on the board. And I'm out of here if we go 9 overtimes in this one. I'm just calling it now.
That would be amazing, but just let it be known, Kevin spoke that into existence, not either Tom or myself. It's just me, Tim, 79 saying TreVeyon Henderson going 23 carries for 150 yards. I could see that 23 carries, and maybe I think if he gets 23, he's probably maybe a little bit higher. But again, if he's getting 23 carries, that means half of them aren't going very far. So, there's going to have to be this ability to stop him that allows for more attempts. And I guess Penn State's probably the most equipped that we've seen so far. I saw a question here, and I don't know if you guys have an answer from XX Deuces Wild 87. Favorite Halloween movie? For me, it's probably just Halloween. And Netflix has a series right now. I think the movies that made us are movies we love, and they look back at. And so, how the Halloween was one that they just released. I recommend that. Take a look at that, and seeing all of these classic movies made on shoestring budgets that we grew up with. But for me, yes, I mean, it's Halloween, the original, the first, and that. Anybody else? Tom, you got one?
I'm not a super big Halloween movie person. I mean, the original Halloween is a good one. My wife is a big horror movie person, and she had. It was a terrible, terrible old one with David Copperfield, and he was a magician on a train, and I think it was a fraternity party on a train, and people keep getting killed. It was terrible, and we watched it when we first started dating, and I married her anyway, and I cannot remember the name of the movie for the life of me, but if Kevin talks, I will dig it up. I will figure it out.
I'm going to just throw out a horrible movie, but it's so bad it's become good, and that's just Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I know that isn't necessary. I mean, it's not your slasher Halloween type of movie. I would have taken, if I were first, I would have just taken an original Halloween, because that one is just too simple. As long as nobody takes something like Casper the Ghost or whatever, I guess we're fine. But I certainly had my opportunities in high school and college to go see Rocky Horror Picture Show at the midnight showing on Saturday night at the old cinema, and it was always a good time. So, I guess it's maybe not the standard answer, but I am trying to give Tom a chance to find this horrible movie that he saw about fraternity slasher train party. Yeah, I don't know.
The amazing thing about it, Tom, it's Terror Train from 1980, and it stars Jamie Lee Curtis as well. So
yes,
you got
yes,
Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. You got her
there
in
you go.
Terror Train. I don't know if she's in Rocky Horror Picture Show. I've never seen Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's not really my scene, and I know there's no real scene for it. It was never. I never ran into it at any point in my life.
Susan
They used to show
Sarandon,
that.
Barry Bostwick, Meatloaf. Come on, Meatloaf. Meatloaf is in the damn movie. Come on, man.
I had enough Meatloaf in the 90s and also with Fight Club.
They used to have that. They used to show that at one of the theaters, like up High Street, like up in Clintonville. There was an old theater
At Graceland.
Graceland, yeah. They showed it at Graceland every weekend. It was one of those.
I may have seen it once or twice there.
The first weekend it won. I never. That was one that my roommate was always like, "We should do that sometime." I'm like, "All right, let's do that sometime." And here we are, 25 years later. We'll probably do it sometime if that theater's still there and they're still doing it, which I suspect they are not.
Poltergeist and Exorcist, I see, are good ones. But see, Halloween or scary. Those are two different things. There's Halloween movies, there's scary movies. Growing up, for me, in a cornfields, basically in Northwest Ohio farm, it's Children of the Corn. I mean, that, and then also Friday the 13th, where you could hear the Jason music in your head at night, no matter what. It's just playing constantly in your head. And so those are also some ones in terms of horror movies that I think are separate from Halloween. David Tyler, a few episodes ago, you guys talked about Nicholas Petit-Frere hypothetically coming back, which got me thinking, who do you think are possible return candidates? Maybe some guys whose draft stock didn't rise as expected. When I asked Nick, or Nicholas, if you prefer, if he was thinking about coming back next year, he's said he hasn't really thought about that yet, or the kind of the standard answer. But Like, he's not a standard answerer, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. And I think he's one of these guys that could come back, but also could be so logical in his thinking that where it's like, now is the right time. And it very well may be the right time after showing what he can do at right tackle and left tackle. Other guys, Kevin, that you think, because who are the guys that we thought would leave? And everybody pretty much has an extra year except for the guys who
Yeah.
came back. So there's a lot of guys to talk about. I mean,
I think,
Seven Banks.
everybody, like Seven Banks had, that pre draft first round grade, and he hasn't had enough plays on the field at this point. I think that somebody like Seven Banks might need to sit there and reevaluate it when he submits his name for the the evaluation, and it's going to say not first round. And I think that another year of seasoning, but then again, you sit there and you look at that situation. Where do things fit for a guy? Denzel Burke is going to have a spot locked down, and I don't care if Ohio State rotates 3 corners or 4 corners. Are you going to be getting enough snaps at that point? So I think that you could even throw into the mix there. Do you have some of these elder statesmen that aren't they're kind of in purgatory? They're not necessarily right for the draft, but they might not have their spot at Ohio State, and they might have to go find somewhere else to go. And I'm not saying, I'm not attaching anybody to that. I'm just speaking in from a 45,000 feet up that, I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that potentially happen.
Especially at corner, when you've got J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock, you're expecting to blossom. Cameron Brown with another year. There was the Seven Banks situation was so odd all season long, Tom, where Ryan Day would talk about, well, he's practicing better. And there was always just this cloud of question. And if there's a cloud of question, that question may be gone by now, but maybe he's ready to go, or maybe it's one of those Damon Arnett things where I'm going to declare it, and Chris Carter texts you or calls you and says, you're crazy, come back. And maybe Seven Banks comes back for that 5th year and then really becomes a first rounder. That's just one guy, Tom.
Yeah, and I think you could go around a lot of that defense, and we've got a great question up or great suggestion up on the screen right now, which is a name I thought about as well. Seven Banks was the first name I thought about. Josh Proctor is the second one because he's obviously got hurt in that Oregon game and he needs another year. You don't want to go to the draft off of 1.5 games and a bad leg injury. Great suggestion from the Rod Farva. Fava, your suspension continues. Zach Harrison needs to come back next year. I don't know if he needs to come back next year, but he absolutely could come back next year. Tyreek Smith is another guy where it's just like, let's see what the back half of Tyreek Smith's season looks like. Because, all of these guys, if Zach Harrison, puts up 6 sacks in the second half of the season, Zach Harrison can go. If Tyreek Smith starts getting on the stat sheet and staying healthy and staying on the field, he can go, but he doesn't have to. Teron Vincent's another guy who I thought, before the season, I would have said, if he's healthy, he probably goes. I don't know that he's going yet. So there are a bunch of guys on that defense where you could see them coming back. Taraja Mitchell's in an interesting spot because I don't know that he's had a fantastic year, but he's been good enough to play. But if he comes back next year, does he get passed? Is this his best opportunity to go? Because, you've got Steel Chambers, who certainly seems like he's trending steeply upward very quickly. So, is that Taraja Mitchell's spot, or is Taraja Mitchell going to start losing snaps to Steel Chambers even this year? So, he's kind of an interesting spot as well.
Yeah, somebody asked Taraja Mitchell about that, about returning, and he said he's not thinking about that at this point. I always use the comparison of the example of Antonio Pittman and Beanie Wells. Antonio Pittman was the starting running back in 2006, did really, really well. Beanie Wells was a true freshman, rushed for, 600 yards. And Antonio Pittman left early because you could just see, like you could see what was coming behind you. And if this is the most Taraja Mitchell is going to play at Ohio State this year, this might be the best opportunity to cash in. But I do wonder how many guys are going to be leaving via the transfer portal to look for that one. I'm going to play 85% of the snaps. I won't be able to do it here because there's too much talent. And it's not that I won't play, but I could go be Jamison Williams rather than, somebody else. And I wonder how much that Jamison Williams thing, that example there, is going to influence a lot of guys to go to a lesser program like Alabama and get more playing time, Kevin.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to slum it and go play at Alabama or whatever, then so be it. I don't know. I could look at a MAC school. I mean, the Sun Belt, Bama. I mean, wherever there's opportunity, I'll just go there. But I think that we just don't know the full impact of what the portal is going to look like, and I think because of that, we could see some of those opportunities. Ohio State is so deep, and part of the issue too is that you have to you have to recruit guys throughout their entire careers. You're not recruiting them as high schoolers. You're not recruiting them as they get on campus and hoping that they assimilate. You're having to recruit them through their entire careers, because that there are people in their ears saying, well, you could go to State U over here and see, as Tony said, 85% of the action, and you wouldn't be rotating, and you would be highlighted, and you would have all this great tape to be able to show the league if you're that type of caliber player. And I do think we're going to see it nationally. The amount we'll see at Ohio State, I mean, that's going to be a very interesting exercise, because that's a very personal decision for each of these guys. And I didn't expect to see Tommy Togiai leave to go to the NFL. I didn't expect to see Haskell Garrett come back. So once again, it just goes to show how little that we really know that goes on in terms of the mindset of these guys in terms of making these decisions. I mean, a Chase Young or a Bosa leaving early, yeah, we got that on lockdown. But when you get into some of these other spots, maybe not as much.
I'm interested to see what happens if both Nicholas Petit-Frere and DeJuan Jones return. What happens with Paris Johnson next year, going into his first year of being draft eligible, coming to Ohio State as the number one tackle in the nation, playing right guard for a year, knowing that I'll be at left tackle next year. And then if that doesn't happen, or will DeJuan Jones move inside? Would Nicholas Petit-Frere move inside so that Paris Johnson can move outside? I think Tom and I have talked about this on the show in the past. I think that will be interesting to see play out. DeJuan Jones playing well enough right now, maybe it doesn't come into play. Nicholas Petit-Frere, certainly. But I think the team could certainly use one of those guys back, because if they don't, then you're looking at a right tackle next year of Josh Fryer, Donovan Jackson, Enoch Famahi.
Yeah.
It's not great. And so they'll need one of them back, but two might be too many.
Well, yeah, and then you're kind of getting into that issue a little bit this year with, Jamison Williams is at Alabama, partly because Chris Olave surprised everyone and came back this year. That's, this gets filed under good problems to have. Like, oh no, another year of Chris Olave. What a terrible curse for Ohio State. Like, I mean, that is not the worst thing. And, this also may be one of these things that worked out, in everyone's best interest. It's a little bit, Chris Olave is back and is having a monster year. Ohio State is off to a very good start and seems like they could make another run at the national championship. So it's good for Chris Olave. It's good for Ohio State. Jamison Williams going to Alabama, like Jamison Williams was never going to get featured the way at Ohio State that he is at Alabama, because it's not that Alabama is not as good a program as Ohio State. It's that Alabama doesn't have the receiving talent that Ohio State does this year. Alabama had a fantastic receiving core last year, and then they all left. So then the door was kind of wide open for Jamison Williams. It's a little bit to me like the Dwayne Haskins, Joe Burrow thing, where, Dwayne Haskins was a better quarterback than Joe Burrow in 2018. So Ohio State came out of that doing just fine. Joe Burrow had a fantastic 2019. He came out of that just fine. And Ohio State ended up with Justin Fields 2019 and 2020. So Ohio State was better in 2018 and 2020. Joe Burrow ended up with, they all three ended up as number one draft picks, first round draft picks. The only school that lost in that whole thing was Georgia. And, that they were not really, that's not Ohio State's problem or LSU's problem. That's kind of how the thing with the wide receivers is sort of working out to me right now. I did see an interesting comment on there, which was Ohio State needs to recruit more cornerbacks from west of the Rockies. And if you remember, they tried 2 years ago. They had Clark Phillips, a cornerback from Utah. No, he was from California.
He ended up going to Utah, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He's from La Habra, California. Went to Utah. He sort of projected as probably a slot corner, but I don't know that he was that much smaller than Denzel Burke. And he has been a starter from day one for Utah. And Utah's not fantastic, but they're a pretty good program. And he started from day one last year. He started all 12 games of his career. So they have tried. I mean, he was someone who they lost because Jeff Hafley was leaving. That's why they lost him. They had him committed. You add him to this team, like, boy, that's a real deep room. But they lost him and Jordan Battle back to back, real late early signing day flips away from Ohio State. You put those two guys on this team, this defense looks, even better than it does right now.
And they tried to go get Darnay Holmes in the past. Tried to get Damani Jackson in 2022.
They had the kid that flipped. Oh God, that ended up at Florida State. That had like the 4-hour ceremony.
Jaden Woodby.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
That was
there
long
are
one.
a few of those. There are a few of those that. The late last minute flips. Like sometimes it works, and sometimes it's Jaden Woodby going to LSU or to Florida State or what's his name from Western Pennsylvania. Mark and I went to go see him play last year right before the Penn State game. Pittsburgh kid who went to LSU like he was going to be, Penn State versus Ohio State.
I know who you're talking. Yeah, I know who you're talking.
Yeah,
who could be in play in the portal? Who knows? I mean,
yeah. LSU was his dream school, and he just went down there and couldn't see the coaches. He just took a drive down to LSU to go see LSU, and then decided to go to LSU. And it's like, whoo, that one's not working out great. But
no,
I mean, maybe they'll get a competent coach next year, and it'll turn around. But yeah, that sometimes those last minute flips work out great, and sometimes it's like, oh boy. Sometimes we learn valuable lessons about impulsive decisions.
Well, and Urban was always good about replacing those flips. And I don't the late ones. It's hard, but you do what you can. It's just me, Tim 79, asking a couple of questions about Cincinnati, the Big 12, and Luke Fickell. How well do you think Cincinnati would do in the Big 12, and why would Luke Fickell leave on the verge of joining a major conference? And this is one of the thoughts that I've had as well. Like, you now have an opportunity, or not now, but you will have an opportunity to play for national championships, and you will have a I don't want to say fairly easy road, but an easier road than other conferences. You'd have to beat Kansas State and Baylor and West Virginia, and you could be able to do that. Or is it a matter of you can only take your program so high in terms of talent level? You can only do so much recruiting. I think the Big 12, I think it will help a little in recruiting, Kevin, but how much does the Big 12 really move the needle with Ohio recruiting when you're considering if a player wants – I mean, they still have Kentucky to go to. We've seen how Kentucky has come in and taken the guys that Michigan State and Purdue and Illinois and other programs usually rely on. But does the Big 12 really move the needle in recruiting? I think I could see Luke Fickell staying at Cincinnati and vying for national championships there, but if Penn State, if Notre Dame, Ohio State, any of those three programs come calling for him, not that Ohio State would, but do you say no for the Big 12?
Well, I look at the situation, and I think that in terms of recruiting, it does help Cincinnati once they do get in a Power 5 conference, because Ohio State's going to get what Ohio State wants. Notre Dame will still do well in the Catholic leagues. I think Kentucky has built some inroads with Vince Marrow, with their coach. But I think this makes Cincinnati an even more attractive location for a lot of kids that maybe they were on the edge with. So the move means something there, but I don't know. I mean, coaching is so temporary in terms of, even though we see these guys employed forever, you just bounce from one place to another place to another place. But this success at a lot of places can be so temporary that maybe you do strike while the iron's hot. I mean, knowing what we know about Luke and his, he has, more loyalty in him to what it is that he loves than most people that I know combined. And you might have to pry him out of Cincinnati with a crowbar, to be honest, unless it's one of the three jobs that you'd mentioned there. So, I don't know. I certainly think that the dominoes could fall the right way, and it might be too much for Luke to be able to pass up. I do think he enjoys what he's building down there. I think that he has built something at Cincinnati. but is, Big 12 supremacy in the wake of Texas and Oklahoma's absence really worth that much? Are they really a Power 5 conference just based on the reshuffling of the deck? I'm not so sure.
It will be interesting to see what kind of weight that is given from committee. But again, if we're talking about 12-team playoff, then you're going to be in being undefeated and winning that conference, or not even being undefeated and winning that conference. I think it just depends on what Luke Fickell wants. And, I don't know how old his kids are now, but they've got to be pretty close to high school and college age at this point. It seems Luke Fickell's been around forever. Maybe they're in high school thereabouts, and maybe you're not ready really to uproot them at this point. So, it won't surprise me no matter what he does, because, he's been there for a while. He's taking them as high as they can go. Will continue to do so, unless they are so beholden to Desmond Ridder at this point that when he leaves, Evan Prater, there's a fallback to the mean for him, and maybe the offense isn't as good. But he's got that program going pretty well right now, and as long as Ohio is your recruiting base, you'd think you could do pretty well in the Big 12. I did see the Rod Farva gave us the right name, Derek Davis. That is correct, the safety that we were trying to come up with. Let me see here. What is the biggest concern, Tom, for the Buckeyes tomorrow night, not including the weather, from Sam Maloney?
I guess the biggest concern is if they can't run the ball for some reason and they get, CJ Stroud turns the ball over a few times, I guess, or you can't punch it in the red zone and you keep kicking field goals. Maybe that it feels like they're going to be able to move the ball in Penn State. If they can score in the red zone, it's going to be over, and it's going to be over fairly early. If you're kicking field goals, if you're going for it on fourth down and not making it in the red zone, I mean, that's kind of what happened against Oregon. Like, yeah, I mean, you could, if they are, 2 for 5 scoring in the red zone tomorrow night, and that 5 seems low, but if they're, 2 for 6 in the red zone and they kick 2 field goals and they go for it on fourth down twice and they miss it, or they turn it over once, like, okay, that's where maybe you're in a little bit of danger. That's about the only way I see them not being able to hit 30 points. And if they hit 30 points, I don't see there's any way they lose, unless you have the Wisconsin Notre Dame game where your defense is playing great, but you just keep throwing pick sixes. Like, unless you're in one of those situations, I don't really see a whole lot of danger. The weather, and we've learned our lesson on the weather forecast last week, which is just an app full of lies, just an app full of angry, stupid lies from the weather people. But, according to the weather app, when I looked earlier today, it was like, 50% chance of rain and 50 degrees. It didn't look like it was going to be a hurricane. It didn't look like it was going to be, crazy winds or anything like that. And we saw last week, a little rain doesn't slow down the Ohio State offense at all. In fact, it might make it a little even more. I mean, we've seen how slippery that turf is. So if you're trying to change directions when TreVeyon Henderson or Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Marvin Harrison Jr. or anyone else is out there changing directions, that can be a bad time for you. So, I guess outside of the weather, I guess not scoring in the red zone would be, I guess, my biggest concern. But I don't. My level of concern on Ohio State's behalf on Saturday night is not nearly as high as I expected it to be coming into the season, put it that way.
Yeah.
Kevin, I saw you put something up there about Rico's time is now and Rico hitting the transfer portal. I think I just saw that. I just saw that commercial for the first time yesterday, the Dr. Pepper commercial, where Rico hits the portal and says Rico's time is now and jumps into the portal.
But you're only a sophomore. You're only a sophomore. Come on. I've
probably heard it like 20 times, but I actually finally watched it. And then I see, then the next scene is like a kicker jumping out of the portal and is like, hey, anybody need a kicker? And then it was very, Dr. Pepper really has their pulse on, or their finger on the pulse of America, because their take on the transfer portal is absolutely accurate. And it is a brand new ball game. And that's why, I saw somebody asking, can Ohio State flip Drew Aller with the quarterback recruiting situation as Ohio State? And we'll get into Quinn Ewers here, I'm guessing, in a second. while you want to bring in the best quarterbacks you can in every class, with Ryan Day, even when they end up losing two guys and now they're down to nobody, he was still able to go out and get Justin Fields via the portal. And I think at this point he is going to be able to go out and get the Justin Fields next time. And, or Malik Willis or whoever, a guy who's starred for 4 years at one place, like even Pitt's quarterback came back for a sixth year. Say Ohio State needs a quarterback. Is he gonna, hey, reach out? And because there are back channels. I'm not saying Ohio State is doing that, but if guys want to talk to schools, and there are ways to do that without necessarily going into the portal, or you can go into the portal and come right back out, just peek your head in and say, I only came into the portal to ask for directions on how to get away from the portal and stuff like that. So, while it's great
like
to
the
have all of
idea.
these 5-star guys, you're going to lose them, but
Mhm.
other established, proven starters will then be like, hey, you need a quarterback, I can come over.
Well, you're losing them because you're having such great production. So I think it's much
Mhm.
more likely that you're going to see them go and get a Chris Chugginoff just to sit there and fill out the room than you're going to see them go out there and get that. They're not going to be in the Spencer Rattler sweepstakes if that happens. That's not going to be the type of situation that's going to happen for Ohio State unless evaluation goes horribly wrong, something unspoken happens. I don't see that type of situation. I think that the portal for Ohio State in terms of quarterbacking will be bringing in somebody who can help stabilize the numbers in the room, somebody that you could trot out there in case you do need to finish off a game or something along those lines. But I don't think that you're going to see an instance where Ohio State needs to try and break up this glut of everybody being within 2 years of each other eligibility wise, or 1 year of each other eligibility wise. You need to have older guys, you need to have younger guys, so that way you don't have a situation of where it's like, well, we got our guy, everybody else is leaving. So that's where the problem could be.
And that's where the problem came after Dwayne Haskins left. It was, you got to, Fields came in, and Chris Chugginoff, who had transferred in, in like the August before that previous year, was like, he's the only one who's left, like, because Matthew Baldwin was gone, Joe Burrow had left, Tate Martell left, and it was like, oh, Chris Chugginoff, who got here like 3 weeks before the season in 2018, 4 months later is the senior guy in the room. Like, okay, that's not ideal. And they have used the portal in the way that Kevin's talked about, bringing in Chugginoff, bringing Gunnar Hoke later, who just it's guys to have another scholarship guy in the room, someone that a little bit of a break glass in case of emergency. I don't think either of those guys ever. I know Hoke didn't start a game. I don't believe Chugs ever started a game, but he would get in the game if later and give you another veteran presence there. So yeah, I think you and I, Tony, in the past have talked about the idea of, do you try and bring in an Ohio 3-star every couple of years? And the idea being like, this is a kid who may be coming without the expectation of starting at Ohio State necessarily, but someone who is, it's been their dream to play for Ohio State. You have an opportunity to play for Ohio State. You're not necessarily expecting to be the next Justin Fields or the next CJ Stroud, but you're happy to be the second string guy and get to go to some bowl games and get a degree. And, it feels like the portal may allow them to do that, because that's kind of what Gunnar Hoke was. Gunnar Hoke was a guy who came out of high school, camped at Ohio State. They decided, I don't think you're, ready to come to Ohio State just yet. Then a couple of years later, when Terry Wilson beat him out of Kentucky, he came back to Ohio State and kind of played that, third, fourth quarterback kind of role. Got to go to a couple college football playoffs, got a couple Big Ten championship rings, like got his master's degree. Like that's a pretty good deal. So maybe you don't need to do that with guys coming out of high school, but maybe that's guys who a couple of years into their careers can use, portal back to Ohio State and fill that role anyway.
I wonder when we're going to see another fifth-year quarterback stay at Ohio State for 5 years. JT Barrett was the last one, Kenny Guyton before him. Those days may be over and done the way Ohio State recruits and guys expect to play. Just JT Barrett could stay 5 years because, one, he started as a redshirt freshman. Two, he was never good enough to leave as an early entrant into the NFL draft. So I don't want to say you're stuck with a quarterback at that point, but he has nowhere else to go, and nobody else beats him out. And then that kind of maybe limits you a little bit in terms of your overall ability to win a national title. And I think Ohio State is recruiting differently than that with the quarterbacks, where Ryan Day is looking for the arm talent to win a national title, and you have those guys. Now, in terms of I could definitely see them bringing in a starter from the portal if you lose Kyle McCord and Quinn Ewers between now and next year, and CJ Stroud leaves after next year to enter the draft, you're left with maybe Jack Miller is still around. Who knows what they do in the 2022 class? They're still trying. But at that point, you've got an established starter from somewhere else, and he looks at Ohio State, sees three consecutive NFL first round draft picks, and Joe Burrow and what Ryan Day has been able to do, and the pedestal that you'll be put on, the Heisman stuff, all of the attention that comes with it, the NIL stuff, and he sees Jack Miller or like no proven starter, and thinking, well, I could go there, I can beat that guy out, and now I'll be Justin Fields. So I think that is a possibility, but it does take multiple guys leaving all at the same time and earlier than Ryan Day wanted, just like Dwayne Haskins did. Super chat from Jordan Kapler. You may have answered this already, but do you think OSU tries to test the secondary of Penn State first, or lean on what appears to be a soft run defense? He has it Ohio State 49, Penn State 10, Kevin.
Yeah, I think you run. I mean, as we had said, you run to set up the pass. I think that you sit there, have some success there. That doesn't keep you from taking a couple of shots. But, I think you kind of see what things look like. You look at what the weather conditions are. You look at everything there. And then you see if you want to do a lot of bunch and crossing routes and just try and go station to station, or if you're going to take some shots and run some flags. But I think that honestly, at this point, I would take on that run defense, because I think that when you look at Penn State, I think that the back seven is better than what you're going to see out of the front four. And even if TreVeyon Henderson is not hitting home runs, even if he's picking up 8, 9, 10 yards a chunk, you're moving the chains, you're keeping things going, and you're exerting your dominance. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. I mean, if Ohio State can go out there and just exert its will in this game, Penn State's not going to be able to do much.
Tom.
Yeah, Ohio State's not going to have to score 50 points to win this game. And if they score 28 points, they're probably winning this game. If they score 35 points, they're definitely winning this game. And I think they can score 35 points, just kind of keeping it on the ground and running the ball. And I'm sure they will start with that. I would be very surprised if they went after the strength of the Penn State defense right away, as opposed to the weakness of the Penn State defense. Hit them where they're weak, make them compensate. If Penn State is like sucking those safeties up immediately, then you take a shot. But this is the wee Willie Keeler line from baseball. Hit them where they ain't. Like, if they're back, run the ball. You can do that. If they're bringing those safeties up, bringing those linebackers close to the line of scrimmage, go ahead and throw behind them. Like, that's fine. Like, however Penn State wants to do it, you can play it. On our Ask the Insiders board, Summit Street Rocket asks, any news on Clifford's status? Per your PSU sources, I have not talked to anyone at PSU this week, but I watched Sean Clifford play last week, and he's going to be healthier this week than he was last week. So I would be. James Franklin said he was 100%, which is not the only factually inaccurate thing that James Franklin said during his press conference this week. But can you see a scenario where unless Sean Clifford has gotten hurt in the last 48 hours, can you see a scenario where Sean Clifford does not play this weekend? Because it seems to me like absolutely he's going to play, absolutely he's going to start, and he's going to go as long as he possibly can, right? Am I wrong on any of that?
No, I completely agree. You're going to play your best options to try and win it. And, we've seen Penn State do stranger things. They beat Ohio State in 2016 when they were, 18 or 17-point underdog in that game as well. So he has experience creating the remarkable and unbelievable, maybe through no fault of his own, and more fault of other people. But yeah, you play the best guys, because the other quarterbacks they have don't give them any opportunities to get the ball to Jahan Dotson, to Washington, to their tight ends. And I think maybe the tight ends would be something to watch, because Ohio State has had some issues covering. We've seen Cody Simon have some issues in defending some tight ends. So maybe that's an area where they will continue to attack. Super chat from Buyers Vacation Rentals LLC. Do you now need to play at a Heisman candidate caliber level to be QB1 at Ohio State? Haskins, Justin, and now CJ. Seems like the bar has been set. And Ryan Day has said that's what they are looking for. Not that the Heisman is the measure, but if you're going to start at Ohio State and play in this offense, the Heisman expectations will come with it, and the attention will come with it. You still have to win, and you have to have a defense that's good enough to win, because this is while it is a stats award, it is a teams in the top 10 quarterback stats award, and Ohio State will always have that. But you have to complete 65% of your passes or better. You have to have low interceptions. You have to be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, because they want you have to be able to win a national championship. And then if you're in the playoff talk, you're a top 5 team, you throw the ball a lot like Ohio State does, Tom, that automatically, that brings with it the Heisman candidacy.
Yeah, and I mean, you just listed all those guys: Haskins, Justin Fields, and C.J. Stroud. The guy before Dwayne Haskins was also almost a Heisman finalist at one point. He was 5th in 2014, and arguably, if he doesn't break his ankle against Wisconsin or against Michigan and gets to play that Wisconsin game, maybe he is a Heisman finalist. He missed it. Now, there's a whole separate conversation about, is he a Heisman finalist and then Ohio State doesn't win the national championship? Because I think there's a possibility that's true as well. But yeah, I mean, the bar has been set at this point. And this is, you have seen a lot of stratification in the sport of college football over the last few years, where there is Alabama and there's Georgia and there's Clemson, and you want to, Oklahoma. Okay. Like you've got like the top tier, and then there's a drop off, and then there's another drop off, and Ohio State is like firmly planted in that top tier. And since Ryan Day has arrived, the offense has never been the issue. Like, it's always been, the offense is good, and the question is the defense good enough to win a national championship? The offense, it just seems like with Ryan Day here in Columbus, the offense is going to just be good. That is just sort of, that it's a little bit like how Oklahoma was until this year. The offense is going to be good enough, and because the quarterback play is going to be so good, because Ryan Day is very good at coaching quarterbacks. Ryan Day is very good at coaching offense. So you're going to have really good offense, really good quarterback play. And as Tony said, who wins the Heisman? It's the quarterback who has the best stats on like a top 5, top 10 team. Well, if you're a quarterback at Ohio State every year, you're going to be top 5-ish. You're going to have good stats. So yeah, you're going to be in that conversation.
Yeah, and I don't think we should get hung up on the Heisman, but it does also help recruiting. I do wonder, though, we've seen Clemson's offense bogged down. We've seen Oklahoma have issues. I find it hard to believe the same thing can happen with Ryan Day, just because of how good he's been at Ohio State. But all of those guys also had really good offenses until they didn't. So I think when you have Ryan Day and you have Kevin Wilson, that is pretty hard to beat. I don't know that there's a better combo offensive coordinator, head coach in the nation. I don't think there is. Certainly not at Clemson. But those two will I think, keep Ohio State from having any falters, and so will the recruiting. I did, let's see, anything else here? Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Let's see, Ty Kroner. A few years ago, PSU had a top-ranked run defense, and Ryan Day opened up the game with 9 straight runs and scored a touchdown. Think Day will attack their strength in order to defeat them mentally. We sort of discussed that a little bit. Ryan Day does love to throw the ball, and when they do come out and just pound the ball, it is very much a message where, I'm just going to keep punching you in the face. Yes, I do love my karate kicks, but for now, I'm just going to punch you in the face. And then after a while, then we'll throw in some karate and, some straight kicks and some heel kicks and maybe a crane kick just to, make a point. So I think you guys both think they're gonna run it to just. I think you gotta see how soft that middle is, and then go from there. And maybe that's a little bit of opposite of what Day loves to do. Because one of the things I love about Ohio State's passing game is, yes, they can go down the field, but teams are so afraid of that deep stuff that Ohio State is so patient. Just, we will take 10 yards on this comeback on this quick out. We don't care. Whereas you see so many teams, they can only dink and dunk for so long, and then they just, I got to throw deep. And Ohio State doesn't have that issue where, if they want to go deep, they can just give the ball to TreVeyon Henderson and he'll do it for you. But just the patience of this offense, and now they're doing some huddling, which is funny to think that they huddle because then it allows for more deception because then they all run to their spots and snap the ball. And it's been fun to watch them implement more new things to this offense. Kevin, what's next for this offense?
I mean,
split backs, diamond formation.
Oh yes, definitely the diamond formation. Definitely maybe the offensive bullet. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we could figure something out at this point. I think that the patience is absolutely the key. The fact, I mean, how many times do we see Jackson Smith and Jigba just sitting there? He sits down in his route and he's wide open, and it's there. And it's a National League small ball. I mean, it's station to station, and they're doing what they need to do. And then once you sit there and say, well, maybe we need to account for this, then they burn you deep or something. And the thing too is, I think that they lull opponents into making mistakes. I mean, there's so many times that we see guys for the opposing teams have eyes in the backfield, and who was it? It was Brock Heward. If they're even, they're leaving. I mean, we've seen so many if they're even, they're leaving type of plays with Wilson and Olave. There's such great recognition by C.J. Stroud in terms of seeing what's out there and having enough faith not only in his own arm talent but in what the receivers are able to do and just how everything's designed that Ohio State can really do it any number of ways.
The bend but don't break defense eventually relies on an offense just not executing because they're not good enough and the quarterback isn't accurate enough. Ohio State can remain patient because they are good enough. The receivers are good enough to break all of their routes right. The quarterback is accurate enough to make that happen. The running back in the running game is good enough to get us 5 or 6 yards on first down to make these throws even easier to execute. So the bend but don't break defense against Ohio State is a nice thought, but eventually you bend into the end zone and give up a touchdown. You don't have to break. You're just going to keep bending all the way down the field, Tom.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you're going to see in the Big Ten is a lot of those defenses that look real fancy right now statistically are kind of bend but don't break. They're not necessarily shutting teams down like Wisconsin's shutting teams down. But a lot of the other ones, the Michigan State, Michigan, there is some bend but don't break there. And that's fine. That works against Indiana or Nebraska or Northwestern or Illinois. But when you're playing a team, that's not going to work in the college football playoff because teams are just too good. They have too many explosive playmakers and they execute too well. The bend but don't break does not work against Alabama. Bend but don't break is not going to work against Ohio State, unless you catch them on a real off night. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Where what does it take for Ohio State to lose? It takes a bend but don't break defense working against Ohio State for Ohio State to not really be able to pull away from Penn State tomorrow night. That requires C.J. Stroud not executing the red zone, Ohio State not being able to run the ball in the red zone. And with the advantage Ohio State should have with their offensive line, and with as good as the running back talent is, and with as good as C.J. Stroud is, and as good as the receivers are, it's like something should be working. If none of that stuff is working, and that's against a defense that isn't, Penn State's defense is not perfect. Penn State's defense has some weaknesses. That really requires Ohio State to not be executing, to not work. That's not the defense stopping Ohio State at that point. That's Ohio State stopping Ohio State.
Tulsa kind of did a little bit bend but don't break in that they dropped 8 and 7 or 8, and we're just trying to limit the passing game. But then you see TreVeyon Henderson goes for 270 yards. Ohio State rushed for 323 yards in that game, only 185 yards passing. I do think this is a different Ohio State offense, a different C.J. Stroud, certainly. And I wonder, can Penn State just, let's just sit back and do what Tulsa did. Do they have the patience for that? And can they do it better where you just sit in zones and force C.J. Stroud to kind of pick you apart? And I wonder how well he will do there. And will he have the same issues he did then? He's a much more confident quarterback. Can Penn State take advantage of that confidence and lure him into some interceptions or anything like that? We are going to start wrapping up. So if you've got some quick questions you want to throw in Super Chat, we can get to those. I do want to touch on Julian Fleming. I see, first, Yakov22 asking if we can rent an RV to make the trip to Lincoln. That would make for some great video. Do you need a CDL license for an RV? I guess for the big ones, probably, right? Is that? Ain't no way I'm parallel parking that thing either.
The way I've seen some people driving RVs, I'm not sure those people have driver's licenses. Just
That's
like
true.
just like Class A. I mean, it's so I'm going to say no. That would be a long trip.
I'm not really interested in having either of you people drive me in an RV, nor am I interested in driving an RV, frankly. No, I'm not interested in that, Tom. Are you?
I'm just thinking back. I was trying to remember how big of a moving truck I drove at one point where I didn't need a CDL. It was, I think, bigger than a 20-footer. So I think you could drive a decent sized RV without a CDL. And so, yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, who's going to sponsor us? You want to get one of those, 1-800-GO-RVing kind of people? Like, I saw a lot of those out at Yellowstone this summer. Like, hey, man, hit us up. You know where to find us. Let's make this happen.
What about, instead of an RV, a moving truck? Those sit three wide, or you can sit 2 wide and put somebody in the back. Like, we'll throw a couch in there. And you know what? We'll just take the cot of shame from game to game in a rental.
I saw that on that Jackass movie, and it didn't look good.
Instead of the cot of shame, it's the mom's attic of shame in the U-Haul truck. I love it. Let's make that happen.
And then you have to sleep out there as well, and it won't get cold or humid or musty at all.
Just throw a couple runs in the back just to keep that person fed.
There you go. Perfect.
Captain Genius says no CDLs needed. So thank you for the information, and thank you for your service, Captain Genius.
They can drive those things and then pull like a big old truck behind them, and not need any kind of. Well, let's just test you and make sure that you know what you're doing. No, they can just go ahead and get this. They can drive these 30-foot boats, and then also have a 20-foot truck being towed behind them, and basically, they're no different than like an 18-year-old getting their license. Both just as scary. That's why I don't drive anymore. I am basically a shut-in, and I don't go anywhere. There was some talk about Julian Fleming. He was held out last week because of the weather, and Ryan Day pretty much admitted as such this week when he was kind of an emergency availability, but they just didn't feel comfortable putting him out there. It was a wet field. The conditions weren't ideal for a guy who was dealing with like a hamstring issue. So I would expect him 1 week past that to be good to go. But if it's a wet field, do they hold him out again? I think you got to start playing him. Obviously, you can't. If he's not ready, he's not ready, and we'll see the availability report tomorrow. But if he's ready, get him to go. And then, Kevin, I saw somebody else ask who scores first, Marvin Harrison or Julian Fleming this year. Let's all three give our picks. Who do you got?
I'll say Marvin Harrison. Till I see Julian Fleming get any run out there, I mean, we're at least seeing Marvin Harrison see a little bit of run. I mean, we finally got to see him out there at a point where it wasn't student body left, student body right. So I think that the odds are in Harrison's favor at this point until I say otherwise.
Oh, until you say otherwise?
Until I say otherwise.
This is Kevin's decision. Who knew? I'm also going with Kevin because apparently it's his decision, so I'm going to have to agree with him. But yeah, I know
about time.
I would have gone. Yeah, I would have gone with Harrison for the same reason. And I will also say I have seen the repeated questions about our Michigan State predictions. We're going to be wrapping up in here in just a minute, but good news. Find the Buckeye Weekly podcast that is dropped. That probably has already dropped today. Tony and I did a whole bunch of conversation about that game. We'll have we'll have that and kind of the weekend preview. Tony and I are also doing the Saturday morning scoop, so you can see even more of that on that show. So we have plenty of time to hear our thoughts on those.
And I will be dropping that here in a bit. So yes, it's not there yet, Tom. Stop pushing me. Stop rushing me. Yeah, I'm going to go with you guys. Marvin Harrison. Day loves his toughness. Probably see more of him. It would be nice to see, just interesting to see him out there when it's his red zone in the first quarter with everybody else. And let's just throw him a fade, see what happens. He's a big guy. Let him go get it. All right. I think that will do it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. This was a blast. We enjoy doing these because they're very, I don't want to say they're very easy. but it's easier than coming up with stuff on our own to talk about when we can just talk to each other, talk to you. You guys can talk to us, and it makes for a light and fluffy show. So thank you guys for tuning in. As always, Kevin, where can people find you on Twitter, and let them know about your podcast?
Yeah, you can find me at Twitter at Kevin_Noon. And of course, we have the Big Me Kickoff, which I just dropped about 2 hours ago, I would say, talking about the Ohio State-Penn State game. I have give my thoughts on Michigan State, as well as some of the other national games. And I do give some ideas of what I'm expecting to see in the first college football playoff rankings show. And we are talking about doing a show while those rankings come on Tuesday as well.
Tom?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Tom Orr 4, TOMORR, the number 4. I'm on, you can find the Morning Scoop podcast that I do daily. Just search Morning Scoop or Buckeye Scoop on whatever podcast platform you get Buckeye Weekly on. And obviously do the Buckeye Weekly podcast with Tony. That also is every day. We do a lot of podcasts. Who knew? But those are on whatever podcast platform you like. And we do appreciate your 5-star ratings and reviews. That does help other folks find those shows as well. Helps us with the algorithm there. So do appreciate that from you guys.
Absolutely. And you can find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. And since Tom already told you where you can find Buckeye Weekly, I don't have to do that. But we do thank you guys, and we will talk to you later.